Hi, my name is Naishali. I go by she, her pronouns.
Laurel, she, her pronouns.
Annabella, she, her pronouns.
I'm Zach. I go by he, him pronouns.
And we're going to be talking about the skull scene from Django Unchained, the Quentin Tarantino movie. And we're going to be talking about the mise-en-scène in it and how the different aspects of the scene represent different things and kind of the close analysis that we could do of this scene that we were given. So if anyone wants to start us off, then that'd be swag.
I can start us off. So within the scene, the colors are very mute, from the character's clothing to the actual set that they're in. The film's color saturation is very much dimmed and gloomy, and within the actual scene, the candles that light the room put kind of like a yellow color onto all the characters. I'd say that has to do with the fact that like it is kind of a serious scene and it kind of makes you very uncomfortable, and that yellow color also brings a more uncomfortable feeling to those who are watching it, which is the same feeling which the characters within the scene are portraying.
Yeah, you just mentioned the candles, and I wrote that down too for scenic realism and how the candles provide the scene with like a natural light source. So I think it would be kind of strange if you had this house in the pre-Civil War era that has no electricity in it and no candles in it, but somehow the room was lit up. So it's like little details like that, like they put candles there because they're like light has to come from somewhere. So the costuming and stuff, I think you mentioned also contributes to like this realism, even though Tarantino's films are notorious for being like over the top and campy and like just exaggerations of themselves. He kind of like this. I've never seen Django Unchained, but I've heard that's kind of like a spaghetti western mixed with like a Civil War film. So like it's nice to have this kind of like dichotomy of having this like a lot of realism within the film, and then you have like the content of the film, which is like essential Quentin Tarantino. But another thing that I also wrote down contributed to this kind of scenic realism was just what he was saying about the skull and like phrenology, because that's something that we totally don't believe in now in psychology, but he was like very adamant. He used it as a justification for like racism and slavery. So like stuff like that. I'm tired of hearing myself talk. Did did anyone have stuff about blocking? Because I had a lot of stuff about that.
Definitely. Sorry, I have my notes beside me. Well, with this seating arrangement, DiCaprio's character is definitely at the head of the table. There isn't anybody at the other head of the table to kind of challenge his authority and or be at equal standing point with him. All the other characters in the scene are at the side point to the table, and they don't really, I can't remember if they don't say anything at all or have minimum lines, but even if DiCaprio's character doesn't seem overly threatening, the power which he stands with and talks with shows that he can back up whatever he's saying.
Yeah, and I think where Django himself is sitting is also pretty important for like the power dynamics that are taking place within this scene, because he's the farthest away from DiCaprio's character, and he's also creating an asymmetry at the table because DiCaprio is at the front, and then you have the two white men on either side, and then you have Django furthest from the camera, and that kind of solidifies him as the outlier. Like even though he's the one being specifically addressed in this scene, he's also kind of put on the back burner, like with where he was put in terms of blocking. So that's something that I wrote a lot about. The skull itself, I think there's so much to talk about, just like the skull, like as a prop. So if anyone wants to jump in and take that one on, because I think that was like the biggest part of the scene. I can start us off. So the skull, the skull is like, obviously it's a movie, so the skull's a prop, but the way that DiCaprio was treating it as if it wasn't a human skull and it was just like an instrument for his little speech, like he wasn't treating it as if it was like the head of a guy who took care of his family for generations. He was like, this is a tool I'm going to use to prove my point and like assert my dominance right now. So Yay, the skull.
Going further into the like props and what was in the room, the prop behind DiCaprio, the two men,
The
they like
stretching
marble-ish
skull.
one. It was also like a very kind of like violent pose of which they were in. And like the prop detail, like it's minor, but you can see that it has to do with like somebody has power over somebody else and they're holding the person that doesn't have power down without much of a route to escape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how he talked about Ben was the guy who took care of his father and his grandfather, and you kind of would think, oh, he thinks highly of them, he's an important part of their family, and he just cuts the skull open like it's like he has hundreds of these in his closet or something. Like he treats it with complete disregard.
Yeah, it definitely served as like a metaphorical prop. Like it was the skull, but it was also like a metaphor for the fact that like these people are like tools in his life that he's gonna use in order to like, I don't know, assert his dominance, even though I hate that phrase. Um, Going back to the sculpture though, I actually looked it up and it's called The Wrestlers, but like if you look at like a whole picture of it, it's like two guys who are struggling for power, and the move that the guy who's on top is in is called the guillotine, which I just thought was kind of interesting, even though the screen department hates the word interesting. I thought that was interesting that it was called like the guillotine, and like one guy represents the acquiescence and the other guy represents the dominance. Obviously, like Django and Candy, represented through that metaphorical prop, to use the correct terminology in this instance. DiCaprio's performance, I think, is just something that you can talk about like very easily, just because how good it was and like the little things he did in it. So like his performance was a big thing for me. If any of you like picked up on some of the stuff that he was doing.
Yeah, he definitely had more of a southern accent for that role. Something also about his portrayal in that movie is his teeth are either false or have heavy makeup on them, because they're discolored and crooked, kind of to like emulate the time period of which they're in. Also, when he's talking, he's the only character to stand up, which kind of even further brings on the power that he holds around the other people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking to like his character, when he's talking, they usually just keep him as the only person in frame, which I thought was interesting. And they zoom in on him, and it kind of makes you pay. It kind of gets you like really engaged in his story and what he's saying. And I think it's interesting how they go from him, and then they'll cut to Django's face, and it kind of highlights the tension in the room between a black man who's free and a slave owner. And there's an obvious tension there, but I think the camera cutting from really close to Leonardo DiCaprio's face and then to Django just kind of giving him this like F you look, it's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and like the cutting to DiCaprio's face, like they had like the close up where like his face is just simply the only thing in the frame, and that obviously contributes towards like the immersion factor of it, because you feel like he's yelling at you, because like he's like you're focused to like look at his eyes, and you're focused like completely on his face. But also I think that like he was able to do this kind of very domineering performance in this very like this like horrible character in a very like calm and collected way. Like the way that he held himself in this scene as if he was like a professor talking about phrenology to like a class of students. Like he clears his throat before he stands up, and then he pulls out his little prop and his pointer, and it was like very calm and collected. It didn't seem as like an enraged slave owner trying to put a man of color in his place. It was just like he knew he was in control of the entire situation, and his tone of voice really reflected that as he spoke.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
speaking to, so go ahead,
sorry,
Laura.
go ahead. No, you're good to go ahead.
Okay. To his respect, when the guy, I don't know, the man that wasn't Django or the man directly next to Django, when he laughed when he said, "I don't know why he didn't kill my father," and then he realized that Candy wasn't joking at all, and that it was actually like he immediately stopped laughing, and it was pretty awkward. And it kind of just shows the amount of power that he has to control the room.
Yeah, and oh Oh my god, I just had a thought and it left my brain. Oh, well, they were talking and he was talking about Ben as just like a person, and he was like, "This is old Ben," and he places his hand kind of like fondly upon the skull. He was like, "Ben took care of my daddy, and I don't know why he didn't slit his throat." I like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like slave owners during that time did not see slaves as people. Like they didn't see them as like
I think my
like,
fire alarm is going off.
oh no problem.
Let me.
Um, but they didn't see them as equals, but then the compassion wasn't there, basically, is what I'm trying to, I think, say. But him being able to say, like, if I was in his position, I would have killed my dad. If I like, I don't know why he didn't want his freedom, kind of further paints like this character as a sadist, because it shows that he recognizes that Ben had like emotions and that Ben was trapped and that Ben was a person. And like he kind of puts himself in his shoes as like an empathic kind of like action there that I think is like interesting, to use the forbidden word.
It's definitely like, to the owner, all the people that he owns are as like, they're objects, but the amount of value which they hold in contrast to him maybe reflects the amount of empathy that he chooses to put into how he sees it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Annabella just texted me. She said she has to leave her dorm because the fire alarm is going off. So
Okay. That's totally fine. That's not her fault.
yeah.
That's perfect timing.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I guess it's just us now to talk about Django. I think
Yeah.
my biggest points have been put on the table there. Like, I think the blocking is obviously like, you know, him standing up, he's above everybody else. Django's the asymmetrical one of the group, and then the head of the table thing. I'm just trying to figure out how long we've been going for. But there's just like I think the way that like DiCaprio himself used his, I think I've already asserted this point, but like his calm and collected demeanor to and like the way he treated the skull, like when he was sawing it open specifically, like he was hacking into it in such like he had done it 1,000 times before. Like Zach said, he has 1,000 skulls in his closet that he can just pull out every time a black guy gets you know, defensive against him. Like it's like he had done it before and he's practiced this, and it was like just this collective demeanor that you don't expect from such a morally depraved character.
Yeah. And when he's talking about how he would see the same 3 indents in his skull, he kind of like, it's very clearly a threat that he's saying that he could kill him. Like in that way, he's not saying I'm going to kill you, but he's saying if I were to take this hammer and smash your brain in, then so it just creates a lot more tension as well. He's kind of still asserting his power over Django, saying I'm going to tell you that I can kill you. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Also, what kind of brings attention the scene a little bit like higher is, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but like immediately there's no background music. The only sound within the scenes is the ones in the room, and there's kind of like a diegetic sound of like the outside, like nature, like crickets.
Like crickets and stuff, and like fire crackling because of candles.
Yeah, and when he threatens Jamie Foxx's character, he taps his hammer. He taps the hammer, and the sound of like the ringing from that. It's definitely diegetic, but it's definitely brought up in intensity to how they would hear it.
Yeah, there was another thing that like I noticed about the scene. I'm trying to like jog my memory, like I'm looking at my notes right now. But oh, the way that he says like if I opened your skull, you'd have the same 3 dots. It's also like it's obviously a threat, but it's also a way to like demean him and to be like, all of you are the same. Like it's the same. Like no matter what's on the outside or the inside, you're all just going to be this to me. And like that line in that dialogue was like, I don't know, it had like 2 meanings to it in my interpretation.
Yeah.
Didn't-
So I watched Django like a couple of weeks ago, and to give greater context to the overall scene, or I guess to, I don't know, emphasize his point that he's making about Ben not killing his father. What's going on is that Django and the guy next to him are trying to deceive DiCaprio, and they're lying to him, and they're trying to, I don't remember exactly, but they're trying to like take advantage of him.
Mhm.
And DiCaprio has like a assistant who's a slave played by Samuel L. Jackson, and he becomes kind of aware that they're lying and deceiving him throughout the dinner. And he actually pulls DiCaprio aside into the kitchen and is like, "Yo, these guys are lying to you. They're deceiving you, just so you know." And then that actually creates a whole fight scene where just everyone dies. But it's kind of interesting how he talks about Ben had the chance to kill his father, and then now Samuel L. Jackson's character is actively looking out for the
Oh
man.
my God,
who,
there's a fire truck outside my window. Sorry. Oh my God, I just cut you off. I'm so
No,
sorry.
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. No, I hear it too.
That wasn't a
Um,
drill for Annabella. What an eventful video discussion we've had.
What a shame.
Sorry, I just cut you off.
No, it's fine. I was pretty much done anyway. I was like, I think, and it's just interesting how the slaves look out for their masters when it's like, obviously they don't respect them as people, but they kind of, it's been so ingrained into their culture where they've just been taught that like, I'm greater than you, you are nothing, you're not a person.
Is that the scene where DiCaprio like smashes the glass and he actually cuts his hand?
Yeah,
Like
it's
the one following it?
yeah.
Because I was like, when I was watching this, like I do enjoy Quentin Tarantino movies as as male manipulator as that is, but and I do really like Leonardo DiCaprio. But one thing I've noticed is that while I was watching the scene, at least having no context to the film, is like everything from the beard to the prosthetic teeth to like the way he was speaking and like holding himself was very like method acting. Like I don't have any like facts to back that up, but like it reminded me a lot of like Leto and a lot Jared Leto in a lot of his films, like Dallas Buyers Club, in which they just fully and wholeheartedly embody the character, like they themselves are immersed in the moment. And I could like tell that like by just like his dialect and the work he put into creating like this realism for this like pre-Civil War era-esque film.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because apparently I was reading about this. There's like an article that was talking about how Leonardo DiCaprio actually was buying I think journals or diaries of ex-slave owners or slave owners, I guess, and trying to read them to kind of get into their like mindset or stuff. So that definitely speaks to your method acting point. And he actually brought up some points to Tarantino, who then wrote this scene based off of what DiCaprio was talking to him about.
Oh my God, people are banging on my door. But yeah, I think that like DiCaprio does that a lot, and I was just like when I was watching it, I really noticed just like how like not only like the accent, but it was just like I think I already said this, but just the way in which he like embodied the whole room, like the way that like he was truly like in control of everything that was happening in that situation, even when things were not in his control and he like broke the glass and cut his hand, he was still like completely in control, both as an actor and Candy Calvin, is that his name? Calvin Candy as a character.
I don't know if anybody else like registered the wallpaper in the room. It was very much like a muddy red color, like blood in a sense. Kind of like all the people that he just disregards who die on his hands.
Yeah, it gives like the scene a very morose undertone.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I also find that I think Zach said earlier that like one of the guys at the table was with Django, like he was like trying to deceive Candy with Django. And the fact that like he still put, even though him and Django are both trying to like manipulate Candy and are both trying to like bring him down, I guess. I've never seen this movie, but I assume they're trying to like kill him, right?
Yeah, pretty
I
much.
haven't seen the movie either, but I know this scene is highly regarded as a very well acted scene.
Yeah, so even though like he's also trying to kill him and him and Django are both like undercover or to use a word,
Yeah.
but like he's still put above Django at the table. Like he's still put the furthest towards the head as he could be at the table, even though him and Django are kind of equals in that sense, but not in the world that they exist in. Like in the movie, the roles that they play are equal, but like in a Civil War era, they would not be. And that distinction was made between them, even though they're like working together.
In that scene, Django is the only other character though to get a full face shot, 2 or 3 times, where his face is the entire filling the shot.
Yeah.
1 second.
And yeah, I think that. Okay, I think that also speaks to just like the tension in the room between a black man and a slave owner.
Definitely.
And I remember the full context is that Django and the man are there to break out, or not so much break out, to buy Django's, I guess, girlfriend or wife. Candy owns her, and they go there to buy her and try to inconspicuously just like, oh, we're interested in this slave, and they kind of like talk about it and they offer to pay him money, and eventually, I don't remember fully, but then it just devolves into just chaos with just murder and bloodshed.
Definitely.
How far have we gotten into this?
I think
we're
I
almost
think
done,
we've
right?
covered enough ground. I think that we've like picked apart this scene and the mise-en-scène within it as much as
You've done sound, color, and blocking, so that's at least some very strong aspects within mise-en-scène.
Mm-hmm. Also, Annabella, like I feel like understandably is
Yeah, poor
us.
Annabella.
So I think now would be a good time.
Are we done?
For the devil. we
We're
were just
just
trying
finishing up.
to wrap up, I think.
Okay.
Unless you have any points you want to add that we didn't cover.
I don't know. I don't know what you guys talked about while I was gone.
Do you have any notes that you had like, just briefly to go over?
I think we talked about it all in the beginning, like mostly the blocking and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we good?
I think we're good. All right.
Okay.
I'll see you guys.
All right. Good talk.
Peace out.
Bye.